It's also interesting, Yala, that not only did your interview show Khwaja Asif making the admission of doing the dirty work of the West or dirty wars of the West, he also went on to say that there could be an all-out war between India and Pakistan, almost a warning, the threat of a possible all-out war between India and Pakistan. How do you interpret that? Do you think that this was just the belligerence of the defense minister of Pakistan, his bravado, or do you believe that a section of the Pakistani army is itching for some kind of a conflict because General Munir and the Pakistan army is facing huge, severe pressure on the home front as well, where they've messed up?
Yes, I think that, the Americans have also ramped up their pressure on Pakistan by telling them. We heard the Vice President J.D. Vance just a few days ago say that, India will likely respond to this terror attack, but they need to do it in a measured way so this conflict doesn't actually escalate. And Pakistan, for its part, needs to, take part in any kind of investigation that needs to be done to find out who the culprits were. And I think there is a lot of pressure coming from the United States now to try and bring down and ramp down the rhetoric from both sides and tell Pakistan that you need to acknowledge that this was a terror attack. You need to acknowledge and say that. So when you do speak to Pakistani officials, they do acknowledge that this was a horrendous attack on innocent civilians in Kashmir. And then they go on to say, as you say, they say, well, we're not backing down. And we have heard from Pakistani ministers who have said, we have 139, missiles, and they're pointing all at India. They are not on display. The reason I think that they're using this language is they cannot show weakness to their domestic audience, because first of all, they're denying that they had anything to do with this attack. Secondly, they're saying India should not be pointing the finger of blame on us. Third, they're trying to use this false flag narrative by telling their audience it wasn't us, it was them, and they're trying to attack us. And fourthly, they need to show a level of strength as well, and they refer back to 2019, for example, and the way that the situation unfolded there, and it ended within a few days. And I think that it is perhaps in the interest of no side for this to escalate, because as we know, confrontation can lead to miscalculation, which can lead to escalation, and both countries are nuclear-armed states. I think that perhaps there is a level of acknowledgement internationally that India will want to respond in some way. But the concern really is, could this escalate into something else? When I have spoken to Indian officials, for example, they've said that the Pakistanis can't keep saying, well, this could turn into a nuclear war, and trying to scare us off from reacting. And equally, the Pakistanis are saying, well, we're not going to back down if we are attacked.
Yalda, it's fascinating what you're saying, but there's a final element to what I want to raise, which is what is perceived in India as Western media double standards. You're on Sky News, you did a full-hour program on India, Pakistan, focused on it. But there's a feeling in India that most of Western media would rather focus on what's happening in Israel, between the Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza, on the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But when it comes to civilians who are killed, innocent civilians killed in Kashmir, by terror, there isn't enough acknowledgement of what India has gone through these years, the suffering of innocents, like in Baisaran, killed by Pakistan-based terror groups. Do you believe that that is changing, that the world recognizes that there are certain countries, whether they are located in the subcontinent or any part of the world needs to speak in one voice?
Well, what I observed is that only Sky News, that is Yalda's channel, they did a very good coverage of the whole incident. But everywhere else, I saw very big double standards. I saw a lot of hatred towards India, everyone being racist, everyone just demeaning India on everything. I saw comments like, is it true that you drink cow urine? And things like that. Like, there were no civility left. So that was the level of hatred I saw on social media.
Against those who sponsor and finance terror and their proxies without any double standards.
Rajdeep, I think it's an interesting sort of concept that you've raised here. I was at the BBC for 10, 11 years, and every now and then when Kashmir would become a flashpoint or a talking point, it would perhaps pique interest. But I do think, and I think that it is something that needs to be acknowledged, that there is a lack of understanding of the conflict's history, why this is a flashpoint, why this is something that both nations, feel so strongly about, what is actually happening within Kashmir, the fact that over the last few years it has opened up, as a territory, and there is far more tourism. I don't think any of these things are properly understood in Western media, in Western society. So while accessing and understanding the conflicts in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, and Western media feel that, okay, this is a European conflict and therefore a level of interest. There is a degree of interest in what Israel does and therefore the focus on the situation in Gaza. I think the thing that I find, and it's certainly a frustration that I feel, because I understand the region and I have a particular interest in the region and highlighting the issues of the region, including the issues around terrorism and the fact that nations have suffered there because of state sponsoring of terrorism. And I want to highlight the issue is that India struggles to talk about it. India struggles to highlight it. India struggles to really raise the issue, perhaps say the way that the Ukrainians have done, and they've mobilized and talked about the atrocities that have taken place in different places in Ukraine at the hands of the Russians. I have found that I've really struggled to get Indian officials to talk on the issue, to talk about what the problems are. I've struggled to get Indians to come to the camera and talk about the importance of Kashmir. And yet the Pakistanis on their part, to be totally fair and frank, want to come out, want to talk about, why this is such a talking point for them, why it's so important to them, why they have nothing to do with this particular attack, for example. But I find the Indian side, whether it's policy or whether it's just the way India is as a state, they don't want to talk before any kind of action is taken. Indian officials will not come out and readily give interviews about the situation in Kashmir or why it is.
That is because you are with the BBC and they know that BBC is going to be biased, so they didn't come. It's not rocket science.
So important for them, to defend the rights of the Kashmiri people, or or to respond to this particular terrorist attack. So I think that adds to the lack of understanding in the West of the issues.
But the truth is, there, Yalda, and I want to raise the question that the West and the Western media perhaps need to dehyphenate India and Pakistan. The truth of the matter is, India is on its way to becoming the third largest economy in the world at some stage in the near future. We are a strong, robust democracy. Contrast that with Pakistan, which finds itself economically now on the verge of bankruptcy, battling various militias within this country, finds itself the army controlling a weak civilian leadership. It has been included in recent times under the Financial Action Task Force grey list. It's had an Osama bin Laden within Pakistan seeking sanctuary, and it's been proscribed in the past for not doing enough for countering terror. Do you believe Pakistan needs a wake-up call from the world, which needs to dehyphenate India and Pakistan? Your interview was part of that wake-up call. Does the world need to understand what Pakistan has become and what India is not?
I think it also was perhaps something that the Pakistani people watched and were perhaps horrified about, that their defense minister, someone who is in a current post, because occasionally, as I said, we hear this from the formers, who are out of their post and will acknowledge something. But the fact that the defense minister of a nation stood in front of, a Western media outlet and a Western journalist and said, absolutely, this was our policy, I think was not just shocking for the world, for India, but also for Pakistan, because the Pakistani people are thinking, well, you're saying to us, we are the victim of this terrorism, but you're actually, as a policy, backing and funding and supporting these terrorist organizations, and it now has become, the sort of the hand that ends up biting, the masters, and its impact.
I hear it a lot on our channels also, where people do say that Pakistan has been a victim of terrorism, but it has been sowed by their leadership only. Like, उनने खुद जो किया है उसी का फल उन्हें मिल रहा है. So it's not like somebody else inflicted that. They did it to themselves. But when you inflict that on somebody else, तो उनकी क्या गलती है? इंडिया ने किसी terrorism को बढ़ावा नहीं दिया. So if you attack us, then what do we tell our people? We cannot say कि हमने किया था तो हमें मिल गया, obviously, because हमने किया ही नहीं. So we have to hit back. And that is the difference. You cannot blame India for your own doing. You have to blame yourself. You have to acknowledge that you did this to yourself and to your neighbors.
Impacting the Pakistani people, their safety, their security, their economy, their standing in the international community. And so I think the other factor is that Delhi and Washington have forged closer ties because of India's, perhaps their concerns about and rivalry with China and China's great power competition with India. And so maybe in this particular moment, it will be different to 2019 because Pakistan has military hardware from India, from China, sorry, and where will China sit if this does escalate, and where does Washington sit if this entire thing escalates? And I think it is down to Western media also to get the story right, to tell the story properly of what is happening in the region and have a better understanding. And I do think it does come down to access as well, that perhaps India needs to provide the sort of access so that Western journalists can freely travel across the country and show the growth and the prosperity within the country.
The truth is, I think India is a far more open society in that sense. But in conclusion, I want to ask you, you will recall, Yala, there was this quote of Hillary Clinton: you can't keep snakes in your backyard and expect them only to bite your neighbors. Eventually those snakes are going to turn in whoever has them in the backyard. So this whole Pakistan is a victim theory really needs to be put under serious questioning. It really doesn't work. A country which harbored Osama bin Laden, found in Abbottabad. This is a country which has attacked India's parliament through its terror group, done Mumbai 26/11. Overall, net, if I may ask you, do you believe anything will really change? Do you really see any change in the air, given that interview with the defense minister? Or do you believe that Pakistan now will have to do much more to convince the international community that they're serious about taking on terrorism? And until then, maybe the international community needs to put Pakistan back under the Financial Action Task Force grey list and really squeeze Pakistan. Net, what do you think next?
I think it also was perhaps something that the Pakistani people watched and were perhaps horrified about, that their defense minister, someone who is in a current post, because occasionally, as I said, we hear this from the formers, who are out of their post and will acknowledge something. But the fact that the defense minister of a nation stood in front of, a Western media outlet and a Western journalist and said, absolutely, this was our policy, I think was not just shocking for the world, for India, but also for Pakistan, because the Pakistani people are thinking, well, you're saying to us, we are the victim of this terrorism, but you're actually, as a policy, backing and funding and supporting these terrorist organizations, and it now has become, the sort of the hand that ends up biting, the masters, and it's impacting the Pakistani people, their safety, their security, their economy, their standing in the international community. And so I think the other factor is that Delhi and Washington have forged closer ties because of India's, perhaps their concerns about and rivalry with China, and China's great power competition with India. And so
ये तो already सुना हुआ है ना?
Maybe in this particular moment, it will be different to 2019 because Pakistan has, military hardware from India, from China, sorry, and where will China sit if this does escalate, and where does Washington sit if this entire thing escalates? And I think, it is down to Western media also to get this story right.
Did she not answer that question and they had to use the previous clip?
To tell the story properly of what is happening in the region and have a better understanding. And I do think it does come down to access as well, that perhaps India needs to, provide the sort of access so that Western journalists can freely travel across the country and show the growth and the prosperity.
Something to happened here. Something happened. Either they lost the footage or something happened
within the country.
Yalda Hakim, for speaking so openly to us and giving us a sense of how the world media is looking at what Pakistan is up to. I hope Pakistan gets the wake-up call it needs. The world needs to wake up to what Pakistan has done and has continued to do, particularly in this region. These are serpents in the backyard which have been allowed to grow as jihadi proxies, and they need surely to be reined in. Otherwise, the world will have to rein in Pakistan. Yalda Hakim, for joining me on the show. Thank you very much.